Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on the Merry Wives of Windsor, and we get to hear from Falstaff today in Act 3, Scene 5. So Falstaff, as you remember, had gone to Mistress Ford's house to try to woo her, but she and Mistress Page had set up this trap for him. So while he was trying to woo Mistress Ford, Mistress Page comes in and she's like, Mr. Ford is right outside, so if you happen to have a man in the house, you should hide him. And they end up putting Falstaff in a laundry basket, a really big laundry basket that Mistress Ford's servant boys have been told that when she gives the word, they have to take this basket outside and dump it in the river with no questions asked. So they do. On the way out the door, they run into Mr. Ford, who's coming in with a whole party of people that are going to search the house for this man who's supposedly in there. The laundry basket gets taken out, he gets dumped in the river. Mr. Ford can't find anybody in the house, so he's like, oh well, everybody come to dinner, and Mr. Page is like, haha, we're gonna make fun of you later. In the meantime, Fenton and Anne Page are making googly faces at each other because they're in love, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So in Act 3, Scene 5, we are in the tavern, and it's after the fact, and Falstaff is humiliated by what happened. So he's there and he's drinking, but then Mistress quickly comes in and she wants to talk to him because Mistresses Ford and Page thought it was so much fun to put him in a laundry basket and dump him in the river that they want to try again to make an idiot out of Falstaff. So they have sent Mistress Quickly, and Mistress Quickly shows up at the inn and she's like, Mistress Ford was so disappointed that you didn't get to, fulfill your intentions, whatever, while you were there. But her husband is going out birding this morning between 8 and 9. So if you want to go back and try again, she's going to be home by herself. Mistress Ford would love to see you again. And Falstaff is yeah, okay, fine. But he still wants to have a drink and some breakfast first. But then Mr. Ford shows up because he was going to show up and find out from Falstaff if Falstaff was successful. And also remember, Mr. Ford is in disguise because he doesn't want Falstaff to realize that he's asking Falstaff to cheat on his own wife, Ford's wife. And just real quick thing that I should have pointed out before, in the folio, he's in disguise as Master Broom. In many other versions, he's Master Brook. I've been calling him Master Brook. In this monologue, Falstaff is going to refer to him as Master Broom a couple of times, and that's somewhere along the way the name got changed from Broom to Brook. Brook is maybe funnier with Falstaff getting dumped in the river. Maybe that had something to do with it, but whatever. I should have mentioned that before, and I didn't, and I apologize for that. So anyway, Ford comes in disguised as Brook/Broom, and sits down with Falstaff. He's like, so what happened? Were you successful? And Falstaff is like, well, I was there and I was kissing her and holding her hand and caressing her and all that sort of stuff. And Ford's like, wait, what? You were there? And he's like, yeah, but then the husband came home. And Ford is like, you were there while the husband was there? And Falstaff is like, yeah, and they snuck me out in a buck basket or a laundry basket. And Ford is like, in a buck, what? How did this happen? And Falstaff says, nay, you shall hear, Master Broom, what I have suffered to bring this woman to evil for your good. Being thus crammed in the basket, a couple of Ford's knaves, his hinds, were called forth by their mistress to carry me in the name of foul clothes to Datchet Lane. They took me on their shoulders, met the jealous knave, their master, in their door, who asked them once or twice what they had in their basket. I quaked for fear lest the lunatic knave would have searched it, but fate, ordaining he should be a cuckold, held his hand. Well, on went he for a search, and away went I for foul clothes. But mark the sequel, Master Broom. I suffered the pangs of 3 several deaths. First, an intolerable fright to be detected with a jealous, rotten bellwether. Next, to be compassed like a good bilbo in the circumference of a peck, hilt to point, heel to head. And then to be stopped in like a strong distillation with stinking clothes that fretted in their own grease. Think of that. A man of my kidney, think of that. That am as subject to heat as butter. A man of continual dissolution and thaw. It was a miracle to escape suffocation. And in the height of this bath, when I was more than half stewed in grease, like a Dutch dish, to be thrown into the Thames and cooled, glowing hot, in that surge like a horseshoe. Think of that. Hissing hot, think of that, Master Broom. So he's recounting the story from his perspective. He's saying, I was put in this basket and a couple of serving boys took me out, and it was kind of terrifying when we ran into Master Ford in the doorway. I thought I was going to be discovered, but then there's also the embarrassment of being shoved into this basket where I had to curl into a teeny tiny ball, and I'm not a teeny tiny man. But then also to have all these dirty clothes piled on top of me while I'm curled into a ball in this teeny tiny little basket. He's like, it got hot in there. It got real hot. And I'm a man who's very sensitive to hot, and I tend to melt when it gets too hot. So there I am in this basket, dying of heat overload, and then they dump me in the freezing cold Thames. Just think about this. Just think about what it is that I'm doing and what it is that I'm going through for you, Master Broom, so that you can have Mistress Ford. And Mr. Ford / Mr. Broom / Mr. Brooke is like, well, that had to be such a horrible experience for you. You've probably given up on this pursuit by now. You've given up on Mistress Ford. And Falstaff's like, oh, no, she actually just sent to me and said between 8 and 9 o'clock this morning I should go because her husband's birding, so I should go over to her house. And Ford / Broom / Brooke is like, it's past 8 o'clock now. And Falstaff is like, oh crap, I should probably go, but come on back sometime later and I'll tell you if this try was a success. So he leaves, and then Master Ford, Mr. Broom, Mr. Brooke gets to have one more monologue at the end of Act 3, Scene 5 before we're done with this scene, but we will get that monologue tomorrow. I'll see you then for that. Mwah.